Hello, my name is Blake, and I'm going to be talking about the typology of school shooters, also known as the criteria that school shooters meet prior to committing a school shooting. I know what you're thinking. Why is a white guy talking about school shootings? Well, before we go any further, I should tell you that I'm a law and justice major, and I decided to do my senior research paper on school shootings and school shooters. The increase of school shootings in the last decade has been quite significant, with 400 total school shootings since 2010, prompting people to worry about their lives or the lives of their kids if they are in school. Last year at Central Washington University, there was a false alarm of a school shooting that caused the students to experience great stress and fear. The false alarm sparked my interest in how to identify credible threats and potential dangers in order to avoid the tragedy that comes with school shootings. With that said, how can we identify school shooters? First off, school shooters are almost always males, as males tend to be more aggressive and violent than females. Females, when dealing with emotions and frustrations, have been found to commit property crimes, like digging their keys in the side of a pretty little souped-up four-wheel drive, or slashing the holes in all four tires, whereas males tend to commit more violent crimes, like, as I mentioned in this, shooting up schools or getting in fights that end up on YouTube. According to a study done by the Center for Homeland Defense and Security, there were more school shootings done by a shooter of an unknown gender than school shootings committed by a female shooter. Secondly, school shooters are often isolated and outcast from their peers, causing them to feel bullied or threatened. Since shooters are often physically less capable than the ones who they feel intimidated by, they turn to guns. Many people, and I used to think this as well, think that gun control laws would prevent people who struggle with mental illnesses from acquiring guns. This is not the case, as people who acquire guns used for school shootings get those guns from relatives or friends. What that means is that the people who commit mass shootings are not legally buying guns, they're getting them from friends. So background checks on those guns will not, and people purchasing those guns, will not stop school shootings. I understand both sides want to end mass shootings, but gun control laws are not going to fix it or dramatically reduce it. Gun safety will have the biggest impact unless all guns are removed from society, which would go against what our forefathers hoped for when they wrote the Constitution. They wanted us to be able to protect ourselves from the government if it ever became tyranny. School shooters are also obsessed with violence and violent activities, both in their media and in their fantasies. The viewing of violence and violent activities leads the shooters to normalize violence, allowing them to desensitize themselves when it happens. Because of this, shooters become emotionless and have no mercy or forgiveness for those that are aggravating them. This leads them to commit violent acts without sorrow, without regret. And it turns out that violent video games do cause problems. Interesting fact, since Grand Theft Auto was released in 1997 until now, there has only been 3 years with less than 20 school shootings. What's even more interesting is that the number of school shootings raised every year since Grand Theft Auto 5 came out, with 2018 having 116 school shootings, which is almost 4 times as many shootings as 2013, which had 33. The number dropped to 112 in 2019 and was at 34 total in 2020 before the coronavirus shut down. So what is causing these school shooters to feel isolated and outcast and have a desire for violence? Well, they don't have full access to therapy. Therapy is much more common these days, which is great for our mental health and addressing our problems. However, with the idea that most school shooters are males, it's not fully effective, as the brains of men aren't fully developed until they're in their 20s. Don't worry guys, I'm 23, I'm past all that. I'm not shooting up the school. With the majority school shooters being between the ages of 14 and 16, which are peak edgy years for the rebels. School shooters lack the brain processes to achieve healthy ways of addressing conflict. My roommates and I know a little bit about the unhealthy ways. I'm not going to talk about that. However, many parents aren't cognizant of the symptoms/problem behaviors until after the shooting happened, causing kids to handle mental illness and mental health problems on their own. Most kids now are not capable of solving their mental health problems and lack discipline and accountability to manage themselves when things aren't going their way. They tend to shift blame and target others when things don't go as planned. School shooters, shockingly, 95% of the time, are current and former students. While I'm a current student, not a school shooter, so obviously there's something else there. This suggests that the goal of school shootings is not to cause terror or to commit randomized violence, but to target a specific group of individuals. One thing that I found super interesting when I was doing my research is that Friday is the most common day for school shootings to occur. Growing up, I don't know about you guys, I was super excited to leave school on Friday and celebrate my weekend. I'd go to the parking lot, I'd wait by the buses, getting ready to go home and celebrate. I feel like that's what a lot of you guys did as well. So we would all go to where the buses were, group up, and get ready to go on the bus. With a bunch of students grouped up, that seemed like the optimal time for school shooters to initiate their plans. In fact, most school shootings happen after school when people are going to the buses. Moving on to my next point, leakage. Normally when I talk about leakage, I think about pipes and drains. But in this context, it is different. Leakage refers to the communication of intentions and plans of attack prior to the attack. Many shooters tell other students that they plan to shoot up the school or target a specific individual prior to the attack. With it becoming much more normalized, this message is immensely more difficult to establish as people joke about it constantly. Many school shooters also had previous suicidal ideation. This suicidal ideation plays a huge role in their commission of the shooting, as 3/4 of all school shootings are ended by suicide, faculty, or surrendering. With the high rate of suicide, we have basically learned that people desire the last laugh, as the shooters in Columbine talked about in their diaries when they were planning out the attack. Oh shoot, here is a bullet. I will now insert this into my roommate using a gun because I'm a responsible human being and know how to use a gun. And then I will commit